So, Peter Keller, Chairman of SEA-LNG and former Executive Vice President of TOTE. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me today. As a pioneer of the LNG pathway, we want to talk about your time at TOTE and your involvement in the development of the world's first LNG-powered container ships and the first LNG bunker barge in North America. It was TOTE's two Marlin-class vessels that were the world's first container ships to operate on LNG. Why did you choose LNG as a marine fuel?
Well, it's kind of interesting when you go back in the history. Around 2012, 2013, we knew that we needed to do something to replace the ships that we were operating between Jacksonville and Puerto Rico, because they were getting they'd been around for some time, and at the same time we were looking at the environmental considerations for our ships operating from Tacoma, Washington to Anchorage, Alaska. Both services were in very pristine waters. Both were in environmentally sensitive waters. And we knew that as we transitioned the Puerto Rican ships, that we would have to take a look at the Alaska ships as well. In that time period, what we were really worried about or concerned about were the SECAs and the drive to
the sulfur emission control areas.
Yes, thank you for that.
Well, we know, but not everybody will necessarily.
And we were really concerned about reducing sulfur and complying with what we knew were going to be ever more stringent requirements, as well as reducing nitrous oxides, NOx. Mm-hmm. And we were concerned that particulate matter would become regulated at some point. That has not happened, although I think it's still in the future. So we were really looking at those issues. Carbon had not yet come forward. The Paris Accords had not yet happened, and the world had not really started to look deeply at CO2. So when we made the decision to go to LNG, it was a readily available fuel in North America, where we were bunkering, and it provided exactly what we needed. It reduced sulfur to almost nil, reduced nitrous oxides by over 90%, if memory serves me correctly, and basically reduced all particulate matter, while at the same time creating an environmental benefit in terms of any fuel leakage or things of that nature, because of course it does not leak, it evaporates, and so there was not an issue there. So that's really what drove the decision. And then we were quite fortunate in that MAN, the engine manufacturers, they were developing an LNG engine for two-stroke for large vessels, and we sort of married up with that together with the NASSCO shipyard in San Diego, and the rest is history.
Because it was, that is several years ago now, and I think that it's fascinating how the LNG pathway is becoming. It's increasingly clear that it's the right pathway. But back then, were there other options? How could you have been sure back then rather than today? It's clearer, but back then, how did you know that LNG was the right pathway to pursue for the long term?
Well, you have to remember that we had not considered carbon as a major concern at that time.
No, so you were focused more on the local emissions then.
We're only considering local emissions and pollution, and of course, LNG solves those problems hands down. And it was not a difficult decision once it was clear that we could actually do it, that you could actually do the welding for the jacketed piping, that man would actually be able to produce an engine that would burn on both liquefied natural gas as well as other distillates, because we weren't going to build an engine or buy an engine that just had one type of fuel. It had to be dual fuel, given where we were in terms of the whole supply chain, as well as the whole issue of changing marine fuels. It's a little easier today, but still, as we talk all the time, it's still a very immature industry, even with the explosive order book for LNG in the last year or so. We're still only at about 6% of the global fleet by tonnage. So it's still immature, and it's still growing, and it's still being refined, especially when you get into the infrastructure and the bunker side of the business.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that, because again, now, of course, the build out of the infrastructure is really escalated and is ramping up all the time. But back then, how did you ensure that you had the necessary volumes that you needed, because it was at such an embryonic stage back then?
With some difficulty. Once the decision was made to build the ships, and once we had the shipyard, and that was progressing, it was clear we needed to figure out a way to bunker the ships, and we really didn't have a lot of help right at that point in time, in that period of time. So we made a decision that we would put together structures that help with the infrastructure. So we solicited a lot of people in the industry, looking for partners to supply the necessary LNG in both Tacoma for the Alaska ships, because we had decided also to re-engine those ships, and for the Jacksonville ships going to Puerto Rico. Tacoma was fairly straightforward, because there was an energy plant right behind our terminal, run by Puget Sound Energy, and they already had plans to turn that into a peak shaving LNG plant, and we could then pull LNG off of that plant directly to the ship with an underground pipeline. So that was mainly an exercise in permitting and actually getting it done, as opposed to Jacksonville, where we had nothing. And we did, however, see a piece of land and a pier right near our terminal, under the Dames Point Bridge in Jacksonville, that we thought would be a viable location for a liquefaction plant. And it had a pipeline, so it was a viable location. And the problem we then had was finding the right partners. And at that period of time, LNG was really starting to develop, and there was a lot of emphasis and a lot of excitement about LNG. And it seemed like everybody and his uncle had a proposal to do something with liquefied natural gas in that period of time. And our real challenge was sorting through potential partners, and deciding on which partners would be the most viable. And at the end of the day, we went with the Atlantic Gas and Light, AGL, and their LNG subsidiary, Pivotal LNG, as well as another organization or two, to not just to build the plant, but also to operate the plant. As that happened, we also understood that we needed a bunker barge. And as part of that process, we contracted with the shipyard in order to build our own barge, because we did not at that time think it viable to get a third party or someone else to come in and do that. It was an all hands on deck kind of an operation for a couple of years. We had some fits and starts, especially on the Tacoma side in terms of re-engineering the ships. And of course, we found out the hard way that it was easier and quicker to build the capital ships at NASSCO than to put all the infrastructure at Jack's LNG and the barge together. So we wound up with the ships coming on, being delivered, but not having a viable bunker capability as we had planned it for any number of other reasons. So we had to scramble and develop a truck to ship methodology that allowed us to transfer about 25 trailer loads of LNG into the ships in about 5 or 6 hours, because of the scheduling requirements that we had with the ships. So we went down to Texas and found a company called Applied Cryogenics, and they worked with us, and we developed a skid that would transfer 4 trailer loads of LNG into the ship at one time, and allowed us to transfer that 25 loads of LNG into the ship in about a 5 or 6 hour period of time, preserving the schedule and preserving basically the business to Puerto Rico. So we wound up not just building the ships, but building the supply chain, finding the necessary partners, and then developing long-term contracting for the supply of the LNG to the ships.
And do you feel as though, I mean, it sounds like there were lots of challenges to overcome, but do you feel like being able to do that has actually sort of smoothed the way somewhat for others that have followed TOTE's lead subsequent to then?
Yeah, because whether we like to or not, we wind up really as the beta test for a lot of things. The engines that we purchased for the Marlin class from MAN were the MEGI series, the dual fuel LNG series, engine number 1 and engine number 2. So basically, we were the beta test, and MAN, the engine manufacturer, and the other vendors did a terrific job in working with us, working with the company, and making sure that all the necessary adjustments and changes that are necessary in something that new was taking place and were done properly and did not impact the business. So that was very important. At the same time, we had all of these regulatory issues. We had all of these other business issues that had to be sorted out and it had to be worked through. Fortunately, TOTE is owned by Saltchuk out of Seattle, a private company in the maritime transportation and aviation industry, and the owners were extremely positive on the activity. They worked with the vendors and very understanding of what we were doing, and very understanding of the fact that we were in fact leading a major environmental initiative within the maritime industry, and that was also very, very important. That we had good support from the company's leadership.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked a lot about collaboration as well. I mean, tell us a little bit about I think it was 2016. Am I right in thinking 2016 when SEA-LNG was formed?
About that.
So coalition to accelerate the uptake of the LNG pathway as a marine fuel. How important has SEA-LNG been in the journey of building out the infrastructure, sharing best practice, helping others follow the path that you and TOTE decided to lead on?
Well, one of the things that's important in any new industry, in any new environment that's starting, is collaboration, is making available information of what has already taken place, providing an open dialogue in terms of not only successes, which we always like to talk about, but also problems and issues along the way. It's a little bit like what we did as TOTE in the early days of this journey with our regulators. In the maritime industry, and especially when we're talking about fuel and safety and issues like that, the regulators, whether it's the IMO or Port State, or in the case of Jones Act ships, the United States Coast Guard, it's very, very important to have open, honest, regular dialogue with all the constituents. And I think that's one of the things that we try to do at SEA-LNG as well. We try to have an open and honest dialogue among all of the players in the whole supply chain, going from the molecule suppliers, the people that actually supply the LNG, all the way through the bunker suppliers and the intermediaries and the engine manufacturers and class societies and port authorities, and then ultimately the end users of the product, the ship owners and the ship operators. So it really is a collaborative issue. It's a collaborative effort across the entire supply chain. Because when you're doing something brand new, you can't just do one piece of it and make it work, because it just doesn't work all by itself. You've got to look at it on a holistic basis. It's a little bit like when I started in containerization in 1968, it was brand new. And basically we were making it up every day. We were making up the rules and the conditions every day. And we were having to look at the whole compendium, again, the holistic view of what you were doing, because you couldn't just worry about getting the container off the ship.
One thing in isolation.
Or just putting it on the ship. Same thing with the LNG. You couldn't worry about just burning the LNG on the ship. You couldn't just worry about what the LNG tankage looks like. You couldn't just worry about where the bunker nozzles were going to be and how you're going to bunker. You had to look at it as a whole package, and that's exciting. It gets to be a little difficult sometimes. It gets to be a little challenging sometimes. But again, with good leadership, with good owners, and with first-class vendors, which we chose, it worked out very, very well, and continues to work very, very successfully for the island of Puerto Rico, and now with LNG for the people in Alaska.
Yeah, because you introduced the first LNG fuel container ships, but you also converted the sister ships.
Yeah,
to LNG.
The Orchid class, the very, very large ro-ros that operate, the two ro-ros that operated from Tacoma to Alaska, they were re-engined on the fly over a period of years, again with man's help. These are different engines. These are four-stroke engines, different power plant, but still now operating on LNG and providing all of the benefits of LNG, reduced carbon, and certainly the complete reduction of SOx, almost all NOx, and and particulate matter, all of which is extremely important in those pristine waters of the Caribbean and certainly the Gulf of Alaska and going up into that area. We know from history that there's been some issues over the years, and it's very, very important that the companies that operate in those environments do in fact understand the environmental conditions and what they need to do to protect it as much as humanly possible.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about emissions reductions, rightly, but the focus in shipping always remains first and foremost on safety.
Right.
And so tell us a little bit about why, again, I'm guessing the choice of the LNG pathway, that was a key consideration for choosing that fuel.
Well, sure, and it's not just the safety of the seamen; it's also the safety of the people that live near the ports and in both Tacoma and going down through Puget Sound. You're going through some confined waters and of course the waters around Alaska, and same for Puerto Rico and Jacksonville, Florida. So safety was very important, and what we realized as we started to look at the issues for alternative fuels was that we'd been moving LNG around the world at that time for almost 50 years, and with an absolutely impeccable safety record. Yes, it was cryogenic, but as a cryogenic, it's not going to it's not going to explode. It's not going to if it vents, it's going to vent into the atmosphere. It's not something you want, but it does not pollute. And the industry had been handling it, as I said, safely for some 50 years as a cargo. So there were lots of good lessons, as well as individuals, ship's engineers, consultants, other safety related people that were very familiar with the fuel, very familiar with LNG and its handling. And we just made sure that we found some of the smarter ones of those guys and girls and put them on the program. And we were very fortunate when we started to build the ships. We had some very, very talented people working with NASSCO, the shipyard, and they were probably the best shipyard in the U.S., certainly for what we needed to do. And the engineering related to the use of cryogenics and all of those new techniques were very important, and we had some really strong people, and the people that we put in the shipyard were basically the four ships chief engineers of the ships when they were actually commissioned and started to work. So we had very well schooled engineers that had basically lived with the ships from the ground up, and that was also extremely important as we went from building to learning how to deal with it and working with our regulators and making sure that the fire department was happy with what we were doing, that the transfer processes were good, and that the safety protocols for actually handling the LNG were well defined and more importantly properly executed.
Yeah.
Not only once or twice, but every time.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's been 10 years, a whole decade. So it's a bit unfair to ask you key learnings, because I'm guessing that's quite a lot. And, we could talk about that for a very long time, but I just wonder whether there are some key takeaways from everything that you've experienced over that decade that you believe inform this pathway going forward.
I think the key takeaway is always who are you choosing as your partner? Who are you choosing to work with? Who is your vendor? It's not always the cheapest. It's always not always the most expensive. You've got to do your diligence when going through the process. As I said earlier, when we started this, it seemed like everybody and his uncle was selling something related to LNG. And I talked a lot in those days about the old westerns, the old American westerns, where there was always somebody selling snake oil that would cure everything and anything. And it seemed to me that during that period of time, as we were going through our diligence, it seemed like almost everybody, had some snake oil to sell. And it was important to go through that process and to figure out who was real, who was not, who had a really good product, who really had good knowledge, and who you could work with, and who was really the most appropriate partner. And that was excuse me, that was really, really important.
And I'm guessing for the LNG pathway, of course, a lot of that due diligence has now been done because it's so established. But in terms of learnings for the other fuel pathways, what you're saying still rings true, very much so, because they are still at such an early stage in the evolution of their own pathways.
As we look at the growth so far, and again, it's still an immature industry, but we've covered off a lot of those points. Our regulators, the IMO, the Coast Guards around the world have started to work with these fuels. They now understand what's going on. There's well-developed procedures. Organizations like SGMF, as well as ourselves, work and develop a lot of these, are working on these standards and taking the industry to the next level of maturity. So a lot of that is already done. We now know who can deliver LNG, who has the right safety record, who really provides a product that works, all of that, and who can deal with the issues of slip, and who can deal with the right kind of piping and the fuel gas units and all of the other components that go into a dual fuel vessel. So we've really worked through an awful lot of that over the last few years, and we'll continue to refine those things, and we'll continue to refine the standards. We're now waiting for the latest rules and pronouncements from IMO. We've heard from the EU. We need to hear from other governments and other regulators around the world. But it is coming together. Is it coming together fast enough? Probably not. Is it coming together in an appropriate fashion? Yes. And when we deal with these international conventions and things like IMO and things like International Maritime, things take time, and there's a lot of interests that need to be heard. There's a lot of governments and regulators that need to be heard, and that all needs to be synthesized. And I think that's what's happening now, and that's really the next step from what we started now. Geez, almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, final thoughts really. From 10 years ago, 2015, and where you started with TOTE there on this journey, what key things would you love to see happen over the next 10 years, ideally even 5 years if possible? Are there certain things that you just feel would really help the industry to get to where it needs to be in terms of emissions reduction targets?
Well, I think the industry needs to continue to dialogue. We need to look at real science, not guesses. We need to take interest levels for certain alternatives and understand that maybe they are financial interests or commercial interests as opposed to scientific interests. And as I said recently, we need to do our diligence. Every ship owner, every ship operator needs to do their own diligence. They need to look at the facts and look at the real facts. And you need to look at your options, obviously starting with safety of your personnel, of your crews, of the people who work on the ships, who work around the ships, the people in the ports, the people that live there. You start with that. And then you look at the real facts surrounding the alternatives that are available. And when you do that, and you look at issues like energy density and availability and cost and long-term availability and sustainability and all those other things, and you look at the pathway as to how you go from what we have today to a net zero environment in 2050 or beyond. It's pretty clear that methane and then biomethane and eventually a hydrogen-based economy, with methane as probably being the most viable carrier of the hydrogen, because hydrogen on its own is not a good fuel, so it needs a carrier, and methane is as good a carrier as any, probably better than most. So the LNG pathway that we see today and that we look at going forward continues to do what it is I think the globe needs. Certainly local emissions reductions continue to be important. We don't consider them the same way today that we did 10 years ago. I think that's an error. I think we need to always consider local emissions and local health and issues like sulfur and nitrogen and particulate matter. And now that we're considering carbon, certainly the LNG pathway provides what we need in terms of carbon reduction today, and a pathway with bio and eventually synthetic materials, hydrogen-based synthetic materials, 10, 20, 30 years from now. So yeah, the decisions that we made when we started looking at this in 2012, 2013, 2014, and the things that we've done so far, I think it's going to stand the test of time.
It's nice to be proven right.
Well, I don't think it's so much being proven right. I think it's just going through a well-defined decision process, as I said, with a whole bunch of smart people, and looking at the science, not being diverted by a shiny object over in a corner.
A silver bullet that doesn't exist.
Keeping your head down and doing it properly, and going through what's really important. and with ships, as you know, we keep saying safety, and then of course the cargo carrying capacity. You want to carry cargo,
not fuel,
and generate revenue as opposed to fuel. So and that's where energy density comes in, and then just the sustainability and the long-term costs and the availability of the fuel on a global basis is very, very important.
Pete, fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise and experiences. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.